What's up, everyone? My name is Alan, founder and consultant at For Now Marketing, and welcome to Braze for Technical Marketers. Today, we're going to go over how to reformat pretty dates to ISO 8601 format using liquid and context step. Let's get started. So here is the data that we are working with today. Let's say we're working with a canvas triggered by the custom event date logged. And one of the properties that we'll be using is called pretty date with the value of 03-25-25. And when we say pretty date, we mean that the date format is pretty enough where it may be inserted directly into an email. Sometimes engineers may send a pretty version of a date so that there isn't any manipulation that the marketer needs to do. It's just data is ready to get sent, and then that's why we call it pretty date. However, when we are working with pretty date, what may happen is that the date is not being recognized by Braze as ISO 8601 format, which may mean that we cannot use our date filter on this value. For example, let's go ahead and build our email, and then let's just, first of all, I'm going to reduce the padding. We'll personalize, get our context variable, and then use the attribute pretty date. And this is how the canvas will be triggered. And then let's just say that we wanted to assign our maybe a different canvas. Let's not assign quite yet. What we'll simply do is try to render this pretty date. First, let's see what happens when we just give it a fixed value. So we're going to go to custom user and then context. And then the value that we saw earlier was 03-25-25. And we are getting the value exactly as expected. Now let's say that we wanted to apply some date filters to it. So date, and then let's just try converting it to Unix format and see what happens. Now, Braze is not recognizing the pretty date as a date format. It just thinks it's maybe a mixture of numbers and characters, and it's not applying the Unix time format that it normally would to an ISO 8601 format. So let's take a look at this. Assign ISO format is equal to 2025-03-25, and then let's apply the date filter just to confirm that it does usually work on well formatted variables, just not with our pretty date. So let's take a look at that. There it is. That's what we should expect to see with the first example as well. And for the most part, Braze is pretty good at recognizing date values and will try its best to convert and apply the date filter if it thinks that the value is a date. However, I guess a date like 03-25-25 is not recognizable by Braze as a date value, and that's why we are running into this issue. So what can we do in that case? And there's so many different ways that a team could pass in maybe not poorly, improperly formatted date examples. The example we're working with is 03-25-25. We could also have March 25, 2025. We could have 03-25-2025. Let's see, 03 hyphen, or I meant to say slash all this time, 03-25-2025. Our point is, there could be so many different examples of improperly formatted date examples. The good news is, for the most part, engineering teams do pass in consistently improperly formatted date. So if one example has this format, chances are all your other ingestions will have this format. So just for this video, we are going to use this as an example and talk about how can we manipulate this value and turn it into the proper ISO 8601 format. So let's write that down. How can we take this improperly formatted date value above and reformat it to ISO 8601 format? And once again, for this video, we will use 032/25/25 as our example. And so to clarify, our goal is to reformat March 03/25/25 into 2025-03-25. So what does that liquid look like? So what we're going to do first is we recognize that we are getting month slash date slash year. The two numbers are the same, but we're assuming that this is the 25th and this is the year 25. So what we're going to first do is create a pretty date array. And then we are going to use the split filter. So assign pretty date array equals, let's do context pretty date, and then we can get rid of all the date filters so it doesn't work anyway. Context pretty date, and then split that whole thing by whenever we see a slash. So what that means is anytime there's a slash in our value, context pretty date, we're going to split the value in those slashes and then store each item inside an array. So now what happens is pretty date array has become an array thanks to this split filter. And now if I try to reference pretty date array 0, 1, and 2, we are going to get the first item, second item, and third item. Let's do this. I am going to just to put some labels here. So pretty date 0, pretty date 1, sorry, and pretty date array 2. Let's see what happens if we go ahead and visualize this one. Hopefully we see 03, 25, and 25. Perfect. So this confirms that our array has been split successfully. So now let's go back and keep working on it. So our new ISO format, and we're going to actually just use that same variable name. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. So we are going to create a new variable called ISO format, and we are going to append the values of the pretty date array. So we're kind of like, we broke apart this pretty format, this improperly formatted value, and we are pretty much like mashing together values. So we are going to make the assumption that that doesn't always work. There's a limitation here where we have to make the assumption that the year is in 2025 and that this year isn't like 1925 or 1825 or even in the future 2125. So we will make that assumption, but we do have to have our variable start with 20. And then what we're going to do is we are going to append the exact year, which is going to be pretty date array. And let's just see what happens so far when we get this. So what we've done is we've hard-coded the 20 for the year 2000 and then appended the last two digits of the year, which should give us 2025 in ISO format. Oh, 2020. Oh, that's a mistake. I grabbed the first item, which is the month. I should be grabbing the last item, which represents our year. So it is not the year 2003, but it should be the year 2025. And yeah, the date and the year is actually a very poor choice. So actually what I'm going to do is we are going to change our date. So there is a distinction. Let's just use 07 just to be super clear. So March 7th, reformat March 7th into 07. And then let's just check one more time to make sure everything is good. So we should have the year 2025. Remember, the first 20 was hard coded. We kind of is it called cheating? I don't know. We kind of made an assumption there. And then 25 is actually the dynamic part coming from our date value. Okay. And then the other thing, the value we're going to append next, and this is very easily forgotten, is we actually need to separate the year and the month with a hyphen, followed by we are now ready for the month. So we are going to append the first item of the array, followed by another append for the hyphen, and then lastly, the last append statement, we are inserting the date value. So we truly have year, month, date format. Let's see what that looks like. And we have March. Oh, and that's because the example that we're using in here is still our old date. So if we do go ahead and change that to 07, we should see 2025, March 7th. Great. So now we have ISO format, and let's say our emails do require us to make some date calculations, which will require us to convert this in Unix time. We should be able to successfully convert our new ISO formatted date into Unix time. Now, the tutorial could end here. I mean, we have our liquid solution. We just showed a successful example of how to convert an improperly formatted pretty date into a properly formatted ISO 8601 format. But let's say this type of work, this type of conversion might be required over multiple emails. Maybe that same exact script needs to be applied to this email and then another email, and oh my goodness, we have a mistake. Now we need to go and change it for every single one of the emails. A content block could be helpful here. We would just put, all the code part of this inside a content block and then just reuse it. That's one way to go about it. The other way to go about it might be the new and shiny feature context step, where we can take in, here it is. Let's minimize that, expand that. We can take in one of the context entry variables. I'm kind of making up my own name here. So let's see. We are going to take in the variable name, pretty date. The data type is, and actually, now that I think about it, I think we're actually creating a new context variable here. So we can't actually call this pretty date. We got to call this, reformatted ISO date. And the example we used, in our liquid, we called it ISO date. We'll just call it reformatted ISO date. We'll give it a time data type. And then what we can actually do is we can insert our context variable, which is pretty date. So the 03/07/25 that we're going to get, we can use it here. And what we can do is we can actually grab all the liquid from the email step that we did. So let's actually just copy and paste this. And then we'll move it over and then only include the important parts here. So what we're doing is, what this step is doing in our understanding is we're going to create a new context variable. It's not going to be one of the entry properties, but we're creating a net new context variable, giving it a data type of time. And we're actually going to take one of the entry properties, the pretty date, and we are going to reformat it into a usable ISO format. So, see, we got to get rid of all this writing. So we are going to get rid of this, assign pretty date array. We can keep that. We don't need all of this. Was just for our visual cue. Assign ISO format is, name this reformatted ISO date. And then all the appends should be good. And then I believe what we're going to do as our final step is simply just output our reformatted ISO date so that Braze knows to capture this value and then store it into the variable called reformatted ISO date. I wish I could preview what happens. I think I just have to trust that this is the way to go. And then let's see if we're able to now see that variable in here. So just for some visual separation, we'll add some dashes, and then let's go ahead and preview that and see what happens. Okay, so we aren't able to see it, unfortunately. So it's either we have an issue with our setup, or maybe there is still some limitations with the context variable where we can't actually render it inside messages. Maybe this can only be used inside delay steps, possibly. But regardless, here we have the solution on how to reformat the date using Liquid. So this part should at least be applicable, and we've successfully tested this. We're going to take some time to investigate context variables a little further and provide an update shortly. That's it for today. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.